All right, we're going to get right into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Surfside Recovery Podcast. We're at Season 2, Episode 2 right now. For those of you watching, upcoming on Saturday, October 12th, we have the Hustle for Henny race out in, was it Andrew Evans Park, PA? With Chester Springs, right?
Phoenixville, Chester Springs area. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a 5K run, walk. It's a little hilly. People say it's a tough 5K.
It's a hustle.
It's a hustle, definitely a hustle.
For Henny.
So, come out. You don't have to run your heart out the entire race. You can just walk. We have a lot of people in strollers, kids, dogs. Should be a good time, and hopefully the weather holds out for us.
Are you planning on broadcasting live?
I haven't really decided yet what we're going to do. You want me to broadcast live?
Might be neat.
Yeah. Well, last year
we semi-live.
Yeah, last year we did a Facebook Live with Geisler. This year maybe we'll record a podcast from up there maybe we'll do that. What other news we got? News updates, anything of that nature?
An update. So last week we talked about the family, the young lady going to the treatment center, being told there was no substance abuse on her insurance. Just for those people who actually were paying attention to that and might care, the insurance policy actually did not have any substance abuse coverage on the policy.
So they weren't bullshitting there?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. That's good news.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to hear that she wasn't lied to, for sure. Totally good.
So we wanted to get into a topic that we got from a user. I guess when the last podcast came out. So in that podcast, we talked about a lot about how when families are in crisis, they don't necessarily know what sort of questions to ask. They're kind of in that mode where they just want to get their loved one in ASAP.
I don't have the exact question. Can you read the exact question?
I can't because my phone's over there being recorded. The question
was through Facebook, right?
It was through Facebook, yeah. So the essence of the question was, could you elaborate on what particular questions that a family member in crisis should ask when they're trying to get their loved one into a treatment center or a detox or something like that? And basically it kind of said, you don't know what you don't know, sort of thing. So I think this was more of an educational piece where you could really, get into that. If you look on the podcast, if you find the video, it should be in the comments to that.
Oh, it was on the video?
Mm-hmm.
It was a comment?
Charlie, do not walk on the computer. No.
Get your fat face out of here.
Yeah, there you go. It should be in there. He's looking.
I thought it was a message.
Don't think so. Thought it was a comment.
I think it was a message.
So other news, we do have a Surfside documentary type thing in production. It's not a real documentary per se. We got a bunch of interviews. My mom came down. We got a bunch of people, residents, staff. We're going to try to make it something pretty cool. So I would say within the next month and a half, that should be out for all to see.
I was thinking about that this morning.
Were you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's cumbersome, but it's going to be good when it's done. It's like one of those things that I don't want to rush, but it's like such a project that I keep. I don't know.
It'll be good, I think.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find the question. I think it was actually a message, not a comment, that I can't see. Because I have a lot of Facebook stuff turned off on my phone because I find it incredibly distracting. And then you get sucked into a bunch of nonsense that means nothing.
The worst is all the notifications from Instagram.
Oh, I have all that turned off.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Turn it off. I just said that to someone last night. They asked me, how do I get better at time management and things like that? I said, well, I removed most social media from my phone. I did leave on Instagram as well as Facebook Messenger, not Facebook, not to be confused. And I also left on LinkedIn, but I have all the notifications from all of them turned off.
So what did you take off?
The notifications. Oh, I took off Facebook.
Oh, okay. All right.
But yeah, I've removed all of the notifications for any of that stuff because I find it to just be obnoxious.
Yeah, no, it's definitely obnoxious, but that's what you pay me for, is to interact with people.
Sure, I get that, but
it's also my livelihood for my business too. You know, I get a lot of messages from people on there, so I want to kind of be.
But I think you can. I think you can adjust it, right? So it's like, so you might not be getting comments. I don't know. I have a time allotted to like check things like that.
Got it. Yeah. All right.
This person that I was talking to is just, good guy in recovery, is trying to like navigate early recovery work, the list of things he's got to do for work, a bunch of stuff. And, and there's been multiple times where, I know like him and myself and a lot of other people, it's like you check that one thing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're caught in the vortex. And a half hour later, you're like, oh my God, why am I even looking at this? And then...
Have you ever used Reddit before?
Not really, but I know of the idea.
So I kind of go back and forth, like on Kicks where I'm on it, but that, along with Wikipedia, is another site that once I get on that, the next 2 hours are gone. Like with Wikipedia, everything's linked to each other. So I'll look up a topic that I'm interested in, start reading about it, and then, next thing you know, I'm looking up some Spanish war that happened in the 1400s. Which is cool because you're learning and you're reading, but
it's like there's a time and a place.
Of course, yeah, usually that happens late at night.
Yeah,
and then I stay up too late, and then I'm tired the next day. Yeah. So getting back to the topic at hand.
So it is interesting. So a lot of addiction treatment or program websites. So there's companies that will build you your website, and they specialize in like addiction treatment websites.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know what you're looking for, you'll see that they're like, it's like the same website over and over and over with basically different pictures and different companies.
Yeah, like plug and play type stuff.
Yeah. So like for me, that's a red flag right off the rip. When I'm recommending someone to addiction treatment, there are certain things that, like, there are some places that are really, 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 really good.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them work really well with certain insurance companies. So it might be a very minimal cost. However, that program may not work with a certain insurance company, and it could be incredibly expensive.
Right. I remember as a patient that's what I would always look for. It's whatever treatment center I could get into that had the minimum out-of-pocket cost is what I went for.
And I think that's the ideal situation, especially when it comes to treatment, because so I don't know if I talked about this last week. So I was at a training up in Cape Cod a couple weeks ago.
Right, yeah.
You remember. And so it sounds like some data out of the CDC, Center for Disease Control, is saying that 75% of the people recover with substance use disorder. But it's kind of prefaced. I'm trying to get clarification on this information. So please don't quote me on this. But it sounds like that 75% is also prefaced with they have to be actively seeking recovery. And that looks like the average person goes to about 7 treatment centers who does recover. So it's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, I don't really get the break. What's the 75% of what?
People get sober.
75% of
people who have substance use disorder get sober.
Huh.
But they have to be actively seeking treatment. So it's not just like, so basically like the guy who can't stay sober, if he's actively going in and out of treatment centers, he is going to have a higher % chance of being one of those 75.
Yeah,
obviously.
Obviously, it makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
But knowing that, so it's like knowing that you have to look at, I think first and foremost, you have to look at the best bang for the buck. We have a family right now. Their son is at a place. They found out, unfortunately, insurance is cut out.
As it typically does.
Sometimes you can get a 30-day pre-authorization depending on the insurance.
Actually, I used to get that at one place.
Yeah, like some places you'll get it, but other places you may not get
Correct.
it. And it depends on the place. It depends on a lot of factors. And, and the mom, I think, is emotionally worse off than her son. Mm-hmm. And she's, willing to self-pay the next 2 weeks to keep him there because he's doing so good.
Right.
And I said, well, there are other options. Like there's places you could put him for 30 days for that exact same cost that are like not necessarily as good, but like not necessarily bad either. But she doesn't want to like disrupt him. Understandable, right? He's doing okay.
Of course.
I get that. But she also doesn't even want to bring it up. And where I was like, look, he's going to show you his cards. If he's willing to be different, like if you say, look, this isn't going to work for us financially here, we have to go over here.
Right.
Like no big deal. Like, all right, tell me what to do. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that treatment isn't necessarily treatment. And I get flack for saying this, but I have a good friend. He is very high up at a treatment center. Mm-hmm. And he says it all the time, is that treatment is pretty much just extended detox, right? Like the 30-day model, we know that the 30-day model is not enough, right? It's and not for nothing. Like last week, I kind of hammered the partial care programs a little bit, but like that's why the PHP and IOP model started and why people got into that line of work, because initially the idea was you were going to extend somebody's care. Right. So you would go from 30 days into a partial care program, do whatever, 20 days, 30 days there. Then you would step down to the intensive outpatient level and then do X amount of days at that. And you actually now you're starting to build like a model where you're looking at 90 plus days,
even more than that, really.
Yeah, worth of like care. However, the massive variable is always the motivation of the client. So when I'm placing somebody into treatment, like if a family calls and asks me for help, some of it, what I'm going to look at is like, what is the necessity to get somebody in, right? Are we talking somebody is like actively using heroin? They are desperately ready to go. They could potentially die at any moment, right, because of the riskiness of what they're doing.
Correct.
And then, I'm going to look at their history. Like, how bad do they want to go? Do they want to go because they desperately want to get treatment and they desperately want to get help? Or do they want to go because mom is saying they can't come home and they're hungry? Right. Two different variables, right? I would encourage a family to potentially spend a little more money at a place where, Matt was on last season from Mountainside. Correct. Yep. So Mountainside, they kind of go above and beyond, and a client, when they're in the residential level, not detox, but the residential level, they'll get 2 sessions a week individual therapy, and they also have a 5-to-1 client to counselor ratio. 5 clients, 1 counselor. Correct. Yeah, it's small. Very, very small. Where, a lot of centers, it's much more triage. Get the guy in. It's a low deductible, if any. Right. Could be covered at 100%. Just get him in, get him safe, get him stable. And then in my eyes, the whole job is to then get the person to the next level of care, where that's where ideally recovery can start. So, I think for families trying to navigate the system alone, I think it can be very dangerous. I also think that, families, when they're having someone help them navigate, to know where does that person work and what kind of relationship does that person have with other facilities. Right. Like we will refer to a bunch of different places. Some of those places refer a good amount of people to Surfside. Some don't really refer any to Surfside.
Right.
I wish they all referred to Surfside, but the truth is they don't. Sometimes families will get a hold of somebody, and like, for instance, I think it's questionable. When I go to a 12-step meeting, I don't go there advertising that I work for Surfside.
That was something you always impressed upon us, like when we came into the house, whether we were speaking at a H&I commitment, at a meeting, or something like that, to not bring that up.
Even when our guys go speak, I still am like, this isn't a sell for Surfside.
Right. Yeah, I remember you telling me that from like...
It's tacky.
Day one. It is tacky. Yeah, you're right.
But what has happened is that people will advertise they work. So like, right, like I'm a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. Like, it's often in a 12-step meeting where like a parent will like talk about their kid is struggling and whatever. And like, I could swoop in and try to save the day and give them my business card.
Right.
But I think it is actually incredibly poor taste and tacky. But what is happening is that there are a lot of people, marketers, other employees going into family groups, and they're meeting families in family groups and then trying to get them into those programs.
Yeah, don't certain places hold family groups for that purpose?
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen flyers for that.
And a lot of the Facebook groups, the like addiction help, all these like different family groups that are set up to like support recovery on Facebook, most of them are operated by treatment centers, and as somebody is posting like, oh, my son is struggling again, somebody will swoop in on the back end from the treatment center and try to get that person to their treatment. Now, again, I think that starts to become dangerous when we don't necessarily provide people with options.
Right.
Because sometimes there's a better fit. Sometimes there's not. I mean, sometimes you could just do any old standard place and it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, I agree to what you said before, and this has kind of always been my belief that, residential treatment is essentially just extended detox. Like, the reason that I always went into a treatment center or into a detox was to physically be separated from whatever situation I was in, whatever city I was in, whoever I was running with. I had to be physically plucked out of that area and into a place that was either somewhere out in the woods, locked up in a hospital, or something like that. But I think you hit a fair point that, once you get through that detox period, the bulk of the time should be spent on trying to figure out what the person is going to do next, like a solid aftercare plan. Because, realistically, and we've talked about on this podcast before, is, how deep or how much stuff are you going to uncover in 30 days? I think you said it on a prior episode, is that, you uncover all this stuff and then it's like, all right, see ya. Deuces. Peace. You're out.
And you're in worse shape than leaving than when you're going in. And that, so to me, like that, when I'm referring, like those are things that I pay attention to. Are they going to do deep trauma work for 10 days until the person's insurance cuts out? And then what? Like, I think that stuff can be dangerous. I think that, I think families need to be forewarned. We had a guy...
What's that, Mike?
We had a guy really wanted to come to Surfside, 20 years old. It was like his 4th time in treatment.
Uh-huh.
So I called the family. He was referred to us. I called the family to see if it would work. The family was very interested. However, 2 years prior, a psychiatrist recommended them to a facility that did not take any insurance.
Okay.
The psychiatrist did not give them any other options. So the family did what they thought, which was listen to the psychiatrist.
Part of that could be ignorance on the psychiatrist, correct?
It's really shame on everybody. It's shame on the family for not doing their due diligence because they had insurance.
Right.
It's shame on the psychiatrist for not giving other options.
Right.
So they sent an 18-year-old to a self-pay program. He was there for 30 days. It cost him $30,000+, and he got high 2 days after he left.
Oof.
And not to say that he wouldn't have gotten high if he used his insurance.
Of course.
But
you just pissed away $30,000. You didn't have to.
I mean, I just wouldn't I wouldn't do for 30 days, if it's a year-long program, if it's like sure, that might be valuable money spent, but again, it's knowing the services and knowing the client, or knowing enough about the client to make an appropriate referral and an appropriate decision. I mean, there's circumstance after circumstance after circumstance where, people, there was a guy for a while up in Tom's River who was like doing these interventions with families.
Right.
And then like they'd get him into treatment, their kid into treatment, and he'd be like, oh wait, by the way, you owe me $4,000. Like out of the blue, like on the back end. And it's like little stuff like that. It's like everything should be clear up front. Like, what is this going to cost? How is this going to work? What types of hidden fees are there? Some places I refer to, they have a service where, the deductible, the client can sign up for the deductible on, so they become on the hook for the deductible, like a credit almost. So if it's like, let's say it's $2,500,
right,
you would be the one to sign up for it. So mom and dad wouldn't have to be the ones paying that.
Got it.
And not for nothing, if you're a chronic relapser and not taking things seriously, like I would absolutely recommend that you do that.
Right.
Get some skin in the game. Like stop putting it just on your parents all the time.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if the kid isn't serious about it, he's not going to give a shit if he defaults on that.
I mean, and that's the reality. So, it's just like we wrote that whole article about families paying for school for their young adults who are struggling with addiction. Like, let them take a student loan. Right. If you have the money to pay for it, leave it in the bank, let it collect interest, let them take a loan to pay for school. And then at the end of the day, if they've done school and they've done well, then take the money out and pay for it.
Right.
But to like continue to pay while somebody drops out and then continue to be on the hook over and over and over again, I mean, that's not shame on the guy, that's shame on the parent.
Right.
For not having a boundary.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So if you had to recommend like 3 to 5 questions of what somebody say, it's my first time in treatment. My mom doesn't know what to do. She gets on the phone with a couple places. Like what are some things that she should like definitely ask?
I think first your mom should call me. I think number 1,
609-709-0244.
Number 2, I think your mom needs to ask how much interaction with a licensed clinician will they have?
Now, what are some of the things that...
You just asked one question. I got to finish that one.
Oh, sorry.
Good.
Like, what are some of the responses that they're going to hear? Like, are there like typical around the bush kind of responses that you get with that? I'm the eternal pessimist, so like I would think.
Dude, I've asked people marketing, and they don't even have a clue. They have no idea. Most admissions counselors, most marketers, they do not know how many licensed staff or quote unquote therapists people will have.
Mm-hmm. Why'd you do therapist in quotes?
Because in the state of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, you can be a counselor or you technically can't call yourself a therapist, but they do, like a therapist, as long as you've signed up for the CADC classes. So technically, like in maybe somebody's signature, it might say like counselor intern. So you can be a counselor intern with a high school diploma as long as you've signed up to take the classes.
Wow. How about that?
So there are multiple facilities in this state and Pennsylvania that I will not refer to, where they operate primarily with counselor interns who primarily have high school diploma or bachelor's degrees. We good on that?
Yeah, we're fine.
For me, that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. We've talked at length about that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem. So number one, I would ask is like, what are the chances that your loved one is going to see a licensed professional as their counselor or therapist?
Okay.
And if they can't give you that answer, I would say that is a red flag.
Okay.
Even if they're like, well, it's only a 10% chance because most of our people are counselor interns, at least they know the program.
Right.
And at least they're being truthful, which I think that is very, very important. I would ask if they charge additionally for laboratory services.
Which would be urines, blood test, that kind of thing.
Yep.
TB test or whatever like that.
Yep.
They do.
Okay. And what that looks like. I would ask if it's primarily if it's a residential. I would ask what is the length of time it takes for someone to see a psychiatrist when they walk in the door.
Right.
Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be 2 weeks?
Now, what's your so to go back for a second? What was the last thing you said
about a psychiatrist?
Not before that.
The urines.
Oh yeah, the urines. So is it typical that it's included, or is it typical it's not included?
I mean,
Or are you just trying to get the number?
It just should be part of. I mean, people who are outsourcing labs. Some people outsource labs. Some people have their own labs. One is not necessarily better than the other, right. But I think it's important to understand, like, are you going to be receiving additional bills or EOBs, explanation of benefits, for laboratory services?
Got it. Okay. And then, so you talked about the psychiatrist. What is the typical time that it takes for someone to see a psych?
Again, that is going to be random.
Right.
There's some facilities that have 2 and 3 full-time psychiatrists on staff. There's other facilities that do not have any on staff and they're all per diem. So they might come in 1 day a week.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time I met one on a webcam chat.
Yep, which is not necessarily a problem. It's not necessarily uncommon anymore.
He wouldn't give me Seroquel.
Yeah. Was it a partial program?
No.
Well, no? Interesting. Were you up at West? Up in the hills?
Nope.
Interesting. Yeah, so the teleconferencing isn't necessarily a problem, but right, like, so if they only have a psychiatrist on site like 1 day a week, and let's say it's a 100-bed facility, what are the chances they can only see so many people a day?
Yeah,
so
8 to 10, 12, what are the chances? Maybe.
And like, it's kind of different if you need a psychiatric evaluation versus you've been on meds previously and have been stable on them and you just need to get
refills or whatever.
Refills or scripts to get started while you're there.
Right.
So that's some stuff that's of interest. I would also want to know, like, what is the policy around going to group and what is the policy between gender?
Okay. So what would you like to see? I think I can actually answer this question.
So what I like to see doesn't happen almost anywhere, which is mandatory group.
Uh-huh.
And I would like to see gender separate.
Yeah.
There's actually more study. So women, and I keep going back to Jesse's stuff.
Jesse on the podcast?
Yeah, Jesse Manson, his stuff about like how women are doing better than men. And he really is 100% correct on that. Like, study shows that men are actually more distracted in group versus women. So men need to be separated from women because not only are men attracted to the women, but they start doing the like peacocking thing. So they
strutting their feathers.
Yeah, strutting their feathers. And, I mean, look, if you're in early recovery, please know that like dating in early recovery is like shopping in the den and can aisle. You're going to get spoiled goods. It's really something you should be mindful of. When your relationship becomes an absolute train wreck, just remember this podcast and remember that I told you so. So yeah, I would like to see, and again, it depends on the facility. Like, it's one thing if people are like walking by each other in the halls. It's a whole nother story if like all of the groups are intermingled.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a little anecdote on that. I was at a partial care with housing, right? And our primary therapy groups were intermingled, right? So this
you
girl,
could sit with your girlfriend that you just met 2 days ago.
You could theoretically, yes. So I was in there with this girl, and she was talking about how she got raped, blah 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 blah, like really really super deep group, right? So then I go outside, right, and we're smoking after the group, and I'm talking to her about it, and I get yelled at by one of the techs for talking to the girls, and I said to the guy, I said, "Listen, we just had a therapy group together. I talked to her in there the whole time. Like, what we're talking about now relates to what happened in the group." Mm-hmm. He's like, "Yeah, but you're not allowed to talk to the girls." And I asked him, I said, "Well, why the hell do I have a group with them if I can't talk to them?" Like, it made no sense.
Well, and it's because their philosophy is what I believe, right? But as a business model, it's not financially possible. So therefore they intermingle people. Right. It's like,
it was the craziest thing in the world.
So somebody
literally 3 minutes after group, we walk up from the group room, walk downstairs, smoke a cigarette. I'm continuing the conversation, get yelled at. Got really aggressive with me, and I kind of snapped on them.
And some of these places, they literally have, which again it's not necessarily bad or good. You just have to be really mindful and understand what's happening. But some of these places have legitimately co-ed housing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like that's.
Like,
I don't know. Like, could you imagine being a parent and sending your kid to a place and finding out not only do they have co-ed housing, but the therapist has a bachelor's degree with no license?
Yeah, I mean, it's like sending the kid to college. Let the RA take care of it, you know?
Whether jump out a window. So... But again... sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And I understand a lot of families that some of the downfall with this stuff is that families, they're not preemptive, we did that whole thing with Assemblyman Bramnick.
Clips to come out soon, by the way.
And, and his area is being devastated by addiction, but nobody in the community talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because then when somebody is in crisis, they don't know where to go.
Right.
They don't know who to call. They don't know what to do. I mean, we've done full intervention work with families where, everybody's denied going to treatment, but the family had very clearly where their loved one was going to go. They knew what the deductibles were going to be. They knew what everything looked like. So when they said, okay, I'll go,
they had it all in place. Yeah. I think my parents did something like that too. I don't know that for a fact, but I would just assume.
Well, after the fourth or fifth time, they kind of know what's what.
Yeah, after the third or fourth time, and I did too. So really, what I was doing was looking for the place that had the best bed and the best food because I knew I was going to be there for a little bit.
So you said 5 things. I think we're somewhere around 4 or 5.
Yeah. You talked about length of time, or how many people are licensed. Talked about length of time before they see psych.
Groups.
Mandatory groups. And then you talked about the gender split. I said 3 to 5, so you're hitting it right in the middle. Good enough?
Yeah, it's fair enough.
All right. Well, that's all we have, I guess, for this topic. Do you have any closing remarks, sir?
I did, and I forget that too.
All right. So if you haven't signed up for the Hustle for Henny race, please go on to Facebook and search Hustle for Henny. That's HENNE. It's going to be Saturday, October 12th in the Phoenixville, PA area. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll see this guy. You'll see me. Charlie will be there.
Charlie will be there.
We'll have a great time.
Charlie's sleeping in his bed if anybody cares.
So thanks for watching. See you next time.
Thank you.